Trump tariffs kick in and what would be the impact on Indian economy? Let's talk about that. Joining us on the show, Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee, Consulting Editor, Business Standard. Also with us is Ajay Sahai, Director General of Federation of Indian Exports Organization, FIO, and Ujjwal Singh Bhatia, former Ambassador to WTO. We'll also very shortly be joined by Nikhil Thakral. But before that, I want to come to you, Shubhamoy. Let's talk about the direct impact on India's exports. Now, there are various, of course, estimates suggesting that about two-thirds of India's exports to the US will likely be impacted, which means there will also be a substantial impact on India's economy. What are you estimating? All right, I don't think we have Shubhamoy with us. Let me quickly get in Ajay Sahai into this conversation then. Ajay, this is the story, and this is a story that is likely to impact a lot of people going forward. It will impact our industries, our consumption, our job market. And in fact, we are also looking at many textile companies in various parts of India already halting production. What's the larger impact you're looking at?
In fact, roughly 45% of India's exports led by pharmaceuticals, smartphone, petroleum products and others are not getting impacted because they are either under the exempt list or they are under Section 232 where there is a uniform tariff of 50% on all the countries. Balance 55% is at stake and unfortunately that includes many of the
What are our guest guys doing if they can't identify?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
All right, Mr. Sai, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, please continue.
No, in fact, I was saying that 45% of India's exports led by pharma, smartphone, petroleum products and others are not getting hit with the high tariff because they are either under the exempt list or they are under Section 232 where there is a uniform tariff. We have the level playing field. Unfortunately, 55% of our exports led by labor-intensive sectors like gems and jewelry, textile, footwear, handicraft, carpet, marine, then chemicals, plastics, all are under hit. And that's a very serious sign for us because most of our competitors are having a tariff ranging between 15 to 20%, where we are at a tariff of 50%. There is none of the sector where we have the margin of 30 to 35%, and therefore, in the given scenario, retaining the US market is extremely challenging, and that's a huge concern for all of us. In some of the sectors where the global companies are involved, they probably have the large margins with the brands which they have. In those sectors, exports will continue. We have been given to understand that some of the global companies who were earlier purchasing from India for US exports and they were purchasing, let us say, from Vietnam for EU exports, they are shifting, they are directing Indian export to go to the EU and US, and the Vietnam exports go to the US. So some of that portion will retain, but in the short term, I think we have to be ready to take a hit in that much of segment. The good part is that with roughly 6 months
could you give me a rough sense of what kind of hit we are looking at? Because estimates suggesting that about $87 billion worth of exports will be impacted. It may be halved going forward next year.
Please bear in mind that a lot of exports have been front-loaded. So in the first 6 months' time, we are not going to take any hit. And in the balance 6 months' time, 45% of my export will not be under hit. Balance 55% may be hit. So I don't expect that the hit it may be at best in the range of around 15 to $20 billion. It will not be much more than that. And let us see in what way the global companies are tweaking their strategy, in what way they will be able to help us to retain the export. It may not go to the US. If it is going to some other destination, we should be happy because industry will be keep on rolling. That's a bigger concern for all of us.
All right, let me then quickly get in Nikhil Thakral into this conversation. He's the owner-director at Maharaja Textile Factory. And Nikhil, what's the sense you're picking up? Is the order book drying up fast? Because what FIO is essentially saying, because majority of the exports have been front-loaded for the next coming 6 months. How are you stocking up in the long run for next year?
See, this is a very challenging situation, and we are fighting on it. But it is very tough because with 50%, it is not easy to manage this. We are looking at alternate markets, and that is the only way, because with 50% in apparel industry, what I understand, and I understand with the people, the friends, and the people around me, it is not sustainable. We can take this shock for another month or two, the running orders, but the new orders are totally drying up. Most of the orders will get on hold, which are for projected for next 3 months. The only running orders for the next month or 2 months, of course, we will be procuring them and pushing them out at whatever the cost may be. But for the future, this needs to change. Otherwise, it will be a very big problem.
All right, it will be a problem, and let me quickly get in Mr. Bhatia into this conversation, who better to understand how it functions. Mr. Bhatia, what are our options at the moment? If one were to look at what really can happen from here going forward, are we in a position to negotiate? We've already not negotiated when it comes to a trade deal. Our administration makes it very clear we are not going to compromise on our farm and dairy sector, which essentially mean a trade deal until, US budges is not possible. But when it comes to Russian oil purchases, I think India is making it clear that there seems to be some sort of hypocrisy at play, where European nations and China seem to have better relations with Russia versus the relationship that India has with Russia. But even then, they are not penalized to the extent that we are.
Well, I think obviously this is a very serious development, because the United States accounts for something like, our exports to the United States account for something like 2% of our GDP. So if a substantial portion of our exports, something like 60%, is facing 50% duties, it is a very serious development. And I think in the short term, we have to face up to the consequences, especially to the small enterprises who are going to be affected in a big way. And we are talking about textiles, apparel, we are talking about marine exports, we are talking about gems and jewelry, leather, footwear, etc. So it's important that in the short term, the government helps these small industries through various measures like debt restructuring and perhaps GST benefits, and helping the employees who face unemployment. But as far as the larger picture is concerned, with Mr. Trump around, I think the only certainty is uncertainty. So it is very difficult to forecast what will be the situation going forward. But as far as we are concerned, I think one positive feature is that our red lines have become very clear to the United States. And I think I also believe that the negotiations will continue. So this is not obviously the end of the whole matter. Negotiations will continue. We will take a hit. We will rise again. And I'm sure the government will come forward with assistance towards market development, to allowing our exporters to diversify their export to other countries and so on. But in the long run, we have to expect, or we have to understand that the United States market cannot be entirely relied upon, and therefore we will need to diversify our exports substantially.
We need to diversify our exports. I think that has become increasingly more important. Shubhamoy Bhattacharjee also joining us on the show right now. Shubhamoy, I think one theme is very clear, that we need to look for alternative markets, and that's not going to be an easy process, or in fact a process that we can finish anytime soon. But in the interim, what sort of impact are you looking at as far as GDP is concerned? We are fine, we are comfortable when it comes to our current account deficit, but capital inflows are drying. And I believe this 50% tariff is going to further hit when it comes to our capital inflows, as well as our current account deficit could further widen up to 1.5% of the GDP. That's the estimate coming to light.
The pushes that, the GDP is the sum total of all the issues that you're talking about. What I would say is that if we break it, this is a big shock. Yes, true. If you want to look into we need to, first of all, instead of, for the government's point of view, the government needs to do specific hand-holding for sectors. If it does that, then a lot of the problems can be handled. For instance, we were just talking about GST rationalization. That's a good thing. Similarly, for the exporters this year at least the ones who are like in the shrimp, the agricultural goods, the ones in textiles, the government will need to give some sort of a subsidy this year. That's very important to ensure that people are not, consumption doesn't take a shock. There's no problems in terms of the associated sectors from them, which doesn't go into a shock. These are the immediate short-term measures that need to be taken, and they are very important. If those are taken, and the government fortunately has the fiscal space to be able to do it, and the state governments also will have to obviously chip in, then we can minimize a lot of the shock. Because as we realize is that many of the export dependent sectors, especially those depending on the USA, will not be able to diversify so fast. It takes time. So while they are doing their job, what is it that the policy front the government needs to do? Well, the government needs to essentially, first of all, as I said, look at the giving some sort of a subsidy, and that very clearly said right at the beginning, right now, instead of waiting for the problem to become big. The second part of it is that what should the government do in terms of larger reforms in the economy to make India a better investment destination? Because if that happens, then FDI will start coming up. As you know, and for the last 5 years, we have been sort of, our FDI net is zero, and it's been so for at least more than 1 year. Our net FPI flows has also been zero, but both are been zero for different reasons. Net FDI has been zero because of the fact that in India, reinvested earnings are going out of India. Foreign portfolio investment into the market has been zero because India has actually been an outperformer. There have been shocks in other parts of the world, and foreign portfolio investors are using their India earnings to shore up their earnings there, their losses there. So that is a different set of things altogether. So that means our stock markets are not in trouble, but it's basically problems in other parts of the world which Indian markets are therefore standing up for. So that's not somewhere India can do anything much. But for FDI, foreign direct investment, the government can definitely see that all the FDI restrictions in every possible sector, and I'm really saying this with an emphasis that in every possible sector, we have often been squeamish about allowing FDI in this sector, not allowing the FDI in that sector, excepting those which are really strategic, like say banking. The government should really give a blanket approval and make it easy for people to come in. I take heart from what Prime Minister Modi said yesterday, that I don't care whether it's dollar or pound coming in, I don't care what's the color of the money, as long as the investment is in India. I think that is the step to take. It is reminiscent of what Deng Xiaoping said. That doesn't matter what the color of the cat, as long as it catches the mice.
Absolutely.
That's exactly it. Absolutely. We need to be pushing on those lines. And I think a crisis is good if we can use it to shore up our capacity substantially, so that we can make a dent. We can't just be the fourth largest economy because we don't have a comparative advantage in any case. We need to develop a comparative advantage in at least 2 or 3 sectors to be able to, next time there's a crisis will always come. The next time there's a crisis, we're in a far better position to face that crisis.
All right.